Professor Ray Bradley, do you sense or feel a change in attitude, overall societal attitude, less debate to debunk the idea of global warming, and more general acceptance that something really is happening on a long-range basis to our climate, and maybe even a sense of more willingness to try and do something?
I'm afraid I don't. I don't see that. I think that the forces that have been confusing the public, putting out press reports, articles, and so on, to try to make the issue go away, it's not going away, have been quite effective at diffusing people's interest in this issue. So I think a lot of people recognize that it is an issue, but it's been pushed back off their agendas. And unfortunately, it's not an issue that's going away. The sooner we do something about it, the less costly it will be in the end. But let's face it, there's a lot of money been thrown at this issue to try to dissuade people that it's not an urgent problem. And that money's been quite effectively used, in fact.
Well, your book, well, you've written a lot of books, but one really sticks out for me because it's not a scientific tome or study, and really was a tough read, if you will, for me because of the way it felt. Global Warming and Political Intimidation, How Politicians Crack Down on Scientists as the Earth Heated Up. I mean, you tell some pretty scary stories in there of people pretty bluntly saying to you, listen, get off of this because funding's going to go away for important research, things are going to change, things are going to happen because you're pushing an agenda that big business, big oil, big automotive company, they don't want.
Yeah, that's true. And I stumbled into this political quagmire inadvertently just by doing the regular science that we do without realizing that this is a political hot button issue. And there's a lot of money, as I said, being spent to try to create an impression that this is not an issue that is well understood. It is well understood. We know what will happen if we don't limit the amount of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. I think we have a pretty good understanding of that. There are lots of technological and economic solutions. What's missing is the political will to take on this issue. It's not a high priority for politicians, mainly because it's one of those very difficult problems that is seemingly a long way away. It's certainly much longer away than a 6-year term of a senator or a 2-year term of a congressman. So what we're asking people to do in the political sense is make a commitment for a generation ahead. And that's, those people are not voting now, and you've got to have some very creative politicians who are willing to take that task on. And we don't have those politicians anymore in Washington, unfortunately. We do at the state level. We have some very far-sighted people in the legislatures in the Commonwealth, for example. Governor Patrick's done a great job, and his staff. And certain politicians have also taken on this issue in Massachusetts, in California, and elsewhere. But at the federal level, it's just been a vacuum of leadership, unfortunately.
Well, if things are generally not good in terms of fossil fuel use, in terms of our carbon footprints now, what do you see happening as we've got these massive growing emerging economies in India and China? That's about 1/3 of the world's population. And these folks want cars now, and they want all the things that everybody else has that uses energy and puts out the carbon-based pollution. We hear terrifying stories about pollution in China's big cities. How much worse is that making it? Is that going to make it in the next few years?
Well, it certainly will make it worse. The irony is, the Industrial Revolution began 200 or plus years ago, and we've been churning out carbon dioxide, we in the West, Europe, and North America largely, and the emerging economies are saying, we want to get to where you are. They're making many of the same mistakes we made by burning coal especially, and they're creating all of the nightmare air pollution problems that we dealt with 50 years ago. So they're running into the inevitable health risks, health problems that comes along with a carbon-based economy. Fortunately, countries like China are also investing big time in renewable energy, and although they're still building a lot of coal-fired plants, they're also investing at a very high rate in renewables, and that is ultimately will bring the price down for everybody, and the technology is being developed too. So I think there's pluses and minuses, but ultimately there's no way they can build their economies with that number of people on a carbon-based footprint, because it just can't work.
We've seen, and I guess this is all anecdotal in a way, but we all wonder about it, an unbelievably huge storm, perhaps I guess the biggest storm ever recorded, just hit the Philippines, massive, massive damage. We saw Superstorm Sandy here just a year or so ago just tear apart the East Coast, and yet we didn't see much of any of an Atlantic hurricane season this year. We know that global warming, as waters warm in the oceans, it affects these storm patterns. What do you make? Is there anything there, or is it just too anecdotal to really say it,
well,
it means
in fact,
something?
NOAA was expecting a big hurricane season. They forecast that. Ironically, most of the hurricanes that did develop this year were in the Pacific. And there were quite a number of big hurricanes that hit the Pacific coast of Mexico up into Baja California. There's a lot of complexity that goes into the development of those storms, including upper level winds and so on. But the fundamental driver of the strength of those storms is the sea surface temperature. And when you look at the history of hurricanes, when you have high sea surface temperatures, you tend to get a lot of storms, and they're bigger and badder. And this was the baddest storm we've ever seen. And all I can say in that case is if the sea surface temperatures off the Philippines had been a few degrees cooler, that storm would not have been the magnitude that it was. So as we drive global temperatures higher, the seas are warming, and that inevitably means that when a storm does develop, it's likely to be stronger. And I think that's a warning for us. We tend to think of global warming as sort of an average temperature, 1 or 2 degrees. But along with that comes all the extreme events, whether it's hurricanes, extreme, all sorts of extremes of heavy rainfall and so on. And the insurance companies are seeing this. They're seeing it in their bottom line. There are more insurance claims. They're retreating from insuring people along the coast because they're worried about the losses that storm surges, rising sea levels will bring about. So I think there are real economic consequences which we tend to compartmentalize into, well, that's a disaster relief scenario, but ultimately that comes out of our taxes too. And so we need to have a much more comprehensive strategy about how we deal with these issues, right from the cause, not just dealing with the result.
Perhaps it's impossible to answer, but because it depends on so many interrelated and in some cases not at all related things, but how long do you think we have to really make some change before it's just too late?
Well, I think inevitably we've missed the boat. We've lost 20 or so years when we started talking about this. The Rio conference that George Bush Sr. went to in 1992, he signed an agreement that would begin the process of limiting carbon emissions. We haven't done very much in that 20 years. And of course, as we keep dumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, that takes thousands of years, literally thousands of years, before all that CO2 eventually gets drawn out of the atmosphere. So we're using the atmosphere as this gigantic trash can where we're just putting stuff in there. And so we tend to look ahead 20, 30 years. I think we have to get to grips with this problem well within that period of time. It's really, it sounds like a long way away, but it's basically just the length of your mortgage, right? I mean, it's not that far away, and we have to lower emissions. We have to get a grip on this globally.
Professor Ray Bradley, Director of the Climate Research Center, University of Massachusetts Amherst, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.